Grand Creators is a deck building pack set to be released in August in the ACG. Like all deck build packs, it's there to give us 3 entirely new archetypes. The first of the Grand Creator archetypes is P.U.N.K. Believe me, you don't want me saying P.U.N.K this entire video. It's an archetype of mostly Earth Psychic type monsters, so get your emergency teleports ready. This is a first impressions type video, so I'm just going to go over their cards one by one, starting off as their boss monster, YuGiOh P.U.N.K Amazing Dragon, which is a sea serpent. It's a level 11 wind sea serpent synchro, with generic materials. Both of its effects are hard once per turn. If it's synchro summoned, you can target opponent's cards up to the amount of level 3 psychic monsters with different names in your field or graveyard, and then you return them to the hand. It's like a mass compulsory evacuation device when you summon it, which is quite a powerful effect. What makes this a bit better, they actually have a level 3 tuner that lets you quick effect synchro summon, so you'd be able to trigger this effect on your opponent's turn if you went first, so that's probably what you'd want to go for going first. Its second effect is that you can target a P.U.N.K monster in your graveyard, except Amazing Dragon, and then special summon it. I feel like the second effect will often be used on the monster that we're about to look at. That monster is Ukiyoe P.U.N.K Carp Rising. It's a fusion monster that's made out of any 2 P.U.N.K monsters, and both of its effects are also hard once per turn. You can tribute it as long as it's been fusion summoned, to then special summon up to 2 level 8 or lower P.U.N.K monsters with different names from your hand or deck in defense position. This effect is, of course, really good for consistency. You've basically turned any 2 P.U.N.K monsters into any 2 other P.U.N.K monsters. Since it's summoned straight from the deck, you can basically just choose any 2 P.U.N.K monsters you want, and you'll be able to get their effects off. So this card is definitely good. The only problem is how you actually fusion summon it, but we'll get to that soon. As a bonus, if it's used for a synchro material, you can target a P.U.N.K monster you control, and this turn it can attack twice during each battle phase. Between this and their boss monster's multi-compulse effect, I feel like this deck's almost designed to go second. I feel like you'd have this on the field and a level 3 tuner, so that you can then synchro summon into their level 11 synchro, compulse a bunch of monsters, and then the synchro would be able to attack twice. Of course, none of those 2 things work very well going first, which is why I think maybe they're based around going second. Another downside is that both of these effects basically contradict each other. If you use it as a synchro material for Amazing Dragon, Amazing Dragon could then revive it, but you wouldn't be able to use the first effect of tributing it, since that only works if it was fusion summoned, not special summoned from the graveyard. You'll instead want to tribute it first, and then maybe bring it back to make a synchro later. We're now onto their main deck monsters. The first of their main deck monsters is No P.U.N.K Foxy Tune. Its first and second effect are hard once per turns. The first one is that you can tribute a P.U.N.K monster to special summon this card from your hand. The second effect is that you can send this card from your hand or field to the graveyard, and also send a card from your hand to the graveyard. And if you do, special summon a level 8 or lower P.U.N.K monster from your deck. It's a fairly steep cost having to send this card to the graveyard, and another card, but luckily the second sending a card is part of the resolution, not the effect, so if it gets negated you've only lost 1 card. Being able to summon any P.U.N.K monster from your deck is a pretty good payoff though, especially since one in particular kind of does everything for the deck. Being the only level 8 monster so far that isn't a fusion, you probably will need this on the field quite often just to make your Amazing Dragon. Finally, its third effect is that when it destroys an opponent's monster in battle, you gain life points equal to that monster's attack. This is fine, I guess. While I haven't seen it yet, a lot of their cards make you pay life points in order to activate their effects, so having a way to get some back is fairly okay, I suppose. Their second main deck monster is No P.U.N.K Seamin. Seamin. It's a level 3 Earth Psychic Tuner monster, so like most of the level 3 monsters we'll see, it's designed to synchro summon with one of the level 8s to make Amazing Dragon. You can pay 600 life points to add any P.U.N.K monster from your deck to the hand, except itself. And also, if it's sent to the graveyard, you can target a P.U.N.K you control and make it gain 600 attack. The second effect is mostly a relevant bonus at best, but the first effect is just a search of any P.U.N.K monster. This is actually pretty decent because you can search Foxy Tune, and then Foxy Tune can send itself and another card from your hand to the graveyard in order to summon any P.U.N.K monster from your deck. The third main deck monster is Draruri P.U.N.K Madame Spider, another Earth level 3 Psychic Tuner. It lets you pay 600 life points to add a P.U.N.K trap from your deck to your hand. So like I said, a lot of their monsters make you pay life points in order to use their effects, but being able to search any monster, or for this one any trap, are actually pretty decent, so you will be paying life points. We'll see what traps they can add soon, but there's one that's actually fairly decent, so it's honestly an okay effect. Its second effect is that when you activate a P.U.N.K card or effect that targets a card your opponent controls, you can also target a face-up monster they control and halve its attack until the end of the turn. This part isn't so great because once you've searched your trap, you're most likely going to try and just fuse or synchro summon this monster away, instead of keeping it around just to halve the attack of an opponent's monster. But since almost all P.U.N.K cards target, if it does happen to be around, you will get off this effect fairly easily. Next is YuGiOh P.U.N.K Sharakusai. Now this is the card that you're actually going to want every single time, and kind of the card that does everything in the archetype. That's because so far it's the only in-archetype way of getting to your fusion monster. Its first effect says that you can pay 600 life points to fusion summon a P.U.N.K monster from your hand or field. The fact that it can use your hand is nice too, because you actually want to try and keep this card on the field, and since most of the P.U.N.K monsters can't special summon themselves from the hand, it's good to just fuse them away if you can. Its second effect is good too, because it actually gives this archetype something to do if you go first. During your opponent's turn, as a quick effect, you can pay 600 life points to synchro summon a P.U.N.K monster. This means that if you have your fusion or your level 8 monster on the field, you can make Amazing Dragon during your opponent's turn, and then send a bunch of cards straight back to their hand. If you manage to get lots of the level 3 P.U.N.Ks into the graveyard, and you time this quick effect right, so basically when they have a lot of monsters out but before they actually have any negates, it can cause significant disruption, so it's worth keeping this card around on the field just so you can do that. To finish off their main deck monsters, we have YuGiOh P.U.N.K Wagon. This one lets you pay 600 life points to add a P.U.N.K spell card from your hand, and as a bonus, when a P.U.N.K monster you control is targeted for an attack or an opponent's card, you can draw a card. The first effect sounds good, until you read the P.U.N.K spells. If they get a better one in the future, for example a fusion card, this card will suddenly become quite good. Its bonus effect of drawing a card is decent enough, but probably not decent enough to keep this card on the field when you could instead synchro summon it or fusion summon it away. It's not the worst main deck monster to just have hanging around on your field if you happen to not be able to use it as a material though. So finally we're onto their back row. Both the spells and the traps have a searcher, and all of those monsters are very searchable too, so if you want to get to any of these cards, you'll most likely be able to. To start off we have YuGiOh P.U.N.K World Picking, which is a continuous spell. It says that at the start of the damage step, if your P.U.N.K monster is battling an opponent's monster, you can destroy that opponent's monster. You can only actually use this once per turn though, so it's not like it just protects you all from battle. It could be a way to make your weak P.U.N.K monsters destroy your opponent's monsters so that your stronger ones can attack directly, but it's really not worth actually searching this card just to do that. Its second effect is that if it's destroyed by an opponent's card effect, your P.U.N.K monsters can't be destroyed by battle for the rest of the turn. Since this relies on your opponents destroying this card, and since it doesn't really do much in the first place, it's more likely than not that your opponent just won't bother destroying this card, and you have no way of triggering that effect yourself. So overall it's much too passive to actually work properly. They have another continuous spell, which is YuGiOh P.U.N.K Crusher Beat. Its first effect, which you can only use once per turn, is that if your opponent activates a card or effect that targets a P.U.N.K monster, you can target a card your opponent controls and destroy it. Again, this is an effect that relies on your opponents deciding to do that, so they'll probably just not target your monsters if possible, either by just going into the battle phase and attacking over your monsters, or by just using non-targeting effects instead. If for some reason they're threatened by this card though, and they decide to destroy it, its second effect activates, meaning that your P.U.N.K monsters can't be targeted or destroyed by card effects for the rest of the turn. The problem with these two continuous spells is that they're much too passive. They basically rely on your opponents doing things to actually get their effects off, so your opponents can just not do that. Even when they do go off, the payoff just isn't very good. So until they actually get a good spell, their spells aren't really worth searching. Now we're on to their traps. The first is Jaruri P.U.N.K Dangerous Gabu. It's a hard once per turn, and says you can target an opponent's monster, negate its effects for the rest of the turn, and then if you have a P.U.N.K monster, you gain life points equal to the targeted monster's attack. As far as back row goes, this is probably their best. It's targeting just like everything else in this archetype sadly, but it does just negate something, and then you get life points back, which is useful since you're paying quite a lot of them to use your effects. Going first, ideally you'd be able to search this with a level 3, and then be able to use their quick effect Synchro Summon, because that's about all they really do on your opponent's turn. Finally we have Jaruri P.U.N.K Nashiwari Surprise. It lets you target a face-down card your opponent controls, or if you have a P.U.N.K monster, any face-up card your opponent controls, and then destroy it. It's not the fanciest effect, but it lets you destroy both back row and monsters, as long as you have any P.U.N.K, which I'm sure you will. You probably will want to run this card just because it's searchable and it's fairly versatile destruction. So to go over the pros and cons of this deck, the pros is that pretty much everything in this archetype is completely searchable. They have multiple monsters that search things, or just summon straight from your deck, which gives them incredible consistency in actually being able to do what you want them to do. As long as you can make the fusion, that will just summon any 2 of your monsters from the deck. Another pro is that their traps are a bit basic, but they get the job done quite well. Negating an opponent's effect or just destroying anything on their field are definitely not bad effects, especially since you get to search those traps with Madame Spider. Finally, another pro is that their synchro monster is definitely decent, especially when you take into account that it can be quick effect summoned on your opponent's turn. Since they discard or use a lot of monsters as cost for their effects, you probably will end up with a lot of level 3 psychic monsters with different names in your graveyard. So when you do finally synchro summon this monster, its effect will be huge and send loads of cards back to your opponent's hand, which could just be game winning. The fact that it special summons a monster back from your graveyard as well is kind of just bonus. And if you manage to keep this card alive for multiple turns, that effect isn't even on summon, so you'd actually be able to get them back a few times. However, they have quite a lot of cons as well, and much too dependent on Sharakusai to actually do anything. That card is both their quick effect synchro and their only way of fusion summoning in Archetype. If that card gets negated, there really won't be too much you can do anymore. As it stands, it would almost be worth running Polymerization in this deck just to have another way of fusioning summon monsters, if you can't get access to Sharakusai fast enough. Using Polymerization, you would actually be able to turn any 2 punk monsters into any other 2 punk monsters, thanks to Kark Rising. But having to main deck Poly just seems a bit strange. I'll reserve Judgment to see if we get a spell that acts as a fusion card, because if they do get that, their other level 3 that searches spells will become so much better immediately. And it will really open this archetype's combos wide open, so let's hope that happens. Another con is that they're just not very good at going first. Your best bet is to just have one of their traps set, and then use the level 3 plus a level 8 to quick effect synchro into Amazing Dragon, hoping that you have enough level 3s in the graveyard make its effect worth it. Other than that, most of their effects are just reactive, and not very decent, so again they're really reliant on Shirakusai to actually do anything if you're going first. Another problem is that they might not be good enough to survive interruption going second. They have lots of very big choke points. For example, if you negate the fusion card's effect to tribute itself to summon 2 punk monsters, you've not only lost your fusion monster, also the ability to get any 2 monsters from your deck. Same with Shirakusai. If you destroy that card before it lets you fusion summon, there's again not much the archetype's going to be able to do. Finally, for now, their spells are just pretty bad. You might not even want to run them at all. Hopefully soon they'll get better spells, but until then, it's kinda sucks having a spell searcher, but nothing really worth searching. In closing, I think it's a very interesting archetype. Their artwork is beautiful, and I like their inspiration a lot. Their synchro boss monster is very good, and getting its effect off with loads of level 3s in the graveyard must be amazing. But until they get a bit more support, I'm not quite sure if they'll be good enough to stand up to the meta at all. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe. And also, if you want to see more from this archetype, I'll probably make a deck about it in the future. So stay tuned for that. Other than that, happy dueling!